In the sweltering heat of a supermarket parking lot, Officer Mitchell's harsh commands to a bewildered 65-year-old black man, George Washington Johnson, set the stage for a tense confrontation. George, caught off guard and trembling, faced unjust scrutiny while trying to explain his presence. The situation escalated as George's daughter arrived and he collapsed from the stress, revealing the deep emotional toll of the encounter. The arrival of Captain Johnson promised a chance for resolution amid the rising tension. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Hey, stop right there. Put your hand on your head, you bum. This is the police officer. Mitchell's voice cut through the stifling heat of the midday sun with an almost razor-sharp intensity, as if it were a physical force driving through the suffocating atmosphere of the supermarket parking lot. The sun blazed mercilessly overhead, transforming the asphalt into a searing expanse that seemed to pulse with an oppressive energy. The whole scene felt charged with an unsettling tension, as though the air itself was holding its breath in anticipation of the drama about to unfold. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Amidst this blistering heat, the center of the storm was a 65-year-old black man, his face a canvas of shock and confusion. He stood there, clutching a few scattered papers in his trembling hands, his body seemingly frozen in place. As he raised his hands slowly above his head, the stark contrast between the police officer's aggressive stance and the elderly man's silent, dignified demeanor was palpable. The man's simple, yet impeccably neat attire spoke volumes about his character, exuding a quiet respect that seemed almost to defy the harsh accusations implied by the officer's demanding words. Officer Mitchell advanced with purpose, his heavy footsteps echoing on the asphalt with a resonating authority that seemed to amplify the gravity of the situation. "Documents now," he barked, his voice imbued with a commanding tone that bordered on arrogance. The elderly man, his movements measured and deliberate, began to lower one of his hands toward his pocket. His eyes, brimming with a potent mix of fear and indignation, remained locked onto the officer's face. The deep emotional strain was evident in his eyes, reflecting a profound sense of helplessness and frustration. "Mr. Officer," the man's voice broke through the oppressive silence, surprisingly firm despite the trembling of his hands. "I'm just a..." "Shut up," Mitchell interrupted, his voice harsh and dismissive. "I didn't ask you to talk. I asked for your documents." The crowd surrounding them, drawn by the commotion, began to pull out their cell phones, their cameras capturing every moment with relentless and dispassionate scrutiny. Among them, a young mother, holding her small daughter's hand, whispered with a voice trembling from a mixture of fear and disbelief, "My God, this can't be happening." Her words hung in the air like a chilling echo, a reflection of the collective anxiety and distress of the onlookers. With one hand still raised in submission, the elderly man slowly retrieved his wallet from his back pocket. "Here are my documents, officer," he said, his voice carrying an undertone of sadness and resignation. He extended the wallet with fingers that quivered almost imperceptibly, each movement a testament to the emotional turmoil he was experiencing. Mitchell snatched the wallet from his hands with a brusque and almost contemptuous motion, his actions imbued with a disregard that felt like a slap in the face. As he rifled through the wallet, his eyes narrowed in scrutiny, finally coming to rest on the ID card that bore the name George Washington. The name, now marked with a sense of tragic irony, seemed to underscore the deep-seated injustice of the moment. "Are you kidding me, old man?" Mitchell's voice dripped with scorn, his tone sharp and mocking. The elderly gentleman, now revealed to be George, took a moment to compose himself, drawing in a deep breath before responding with measured calm. "That's my name, sir. George Washington Johnson. I was born on July 4th, 1958. My parents had a peculiar sense of humor." A ripple of uneasy laughter spread through the crowd that had gathered, the tension in the air slightly lifting as people began to process the unexpected turn of events. Yet, despite this shift, Mitchell's confrontational stance kept the atmosphere charged. "And what are you doing here, Mr. President?" Mitchell's voice was laced with sarcasm, each word sharp and cutting through the air like a blade. George, feeling the weight of numerous eyes on him, swallowed nervously. I came to pick up my medicine from the supermarket pharmacy. I have the prescriptions right here with me," he said, gesturing toward the crumpled papers clutched in his hand. The crowd fell into a tense silence, their emotions a tangled mix of shock, indignation, and a burgeoning sympathy for the beleaguered man. An elderly woman at the edge of the crowd muttered, "That could be any of us. It's not fair." Mitchell, seemingly oblivious to the growing discomfort and the murmurs of discontent among the crowd, pressed on with his interrogation. "And why were you standing out here, acting so suspiciously?" George shut his eyes briefly, seeking a moment of inner fortitude before reopening them with renewed resolve. "Officer," he said, his voice steady and unwavering, "I was simply waiting for my daughter. She was coming to pick me up after I collected my medicine. There's nothing at all suspicious about an elderly man waiting for his family." George's words, imbued with quiet dignity and straightforwardness, hung in the air, prompting spectators to exchange glances of silent agreement and support. Just then, a female voice pierced the tense atmosphere. "Dad, what's going on here?" All eyes shifted to a young woman hurrying towards them, pharmacy bags in hand and an expression of concern etched across her face. A look of relief washed over George's face as he saw his daughter approach. "Sarah, my dear, I'm fine. Don't worry about me." The sudden appearance of George's daughter caught Mitchell off guard, causing a momentary falter in his demeanor. The narrative he had built in his mind began to unravel in the face of this new, undeniable reality. Sarah, her eyes glistening with tears, stood beside her father, her voice trembling with urgency. "Officer, please, explain what's happening. My father is an honorable and respected man. He has never done anything wrong in his life." For the first time since the incident began, Officer Mitchell appeared to waver. The intensity of the crowd's scrutiny, the arrival of George's daughter, and the man's steadfast dignity began to press heavily upon him. At that critical juncture, a voice rose from the crowd, cutting through the tension. "This is outrageous. We all saw what happened. This is blatant prejudice." The outcry of indignation seemed to shatter an invisible barrier. Instantly, more voices joined in, creating a chorus of protest. The crowd's collective sense of justice could no longer be contained. Mitchell, feeling the shifting tide of opinion and the mounting pressure, took a step back. His previously stern face now showed signs of doubt and perhaps a flicker of shame. Standing tall with unwavering dignity, George met Mitchell's gaze directly. "Officer," he said, his voice resonating with years of wisdom and experience, "we all make mistakes. But the true measure of a person lies in how they respond to those mistakes." His words, filled with a profound sense of truth, lingered in the air, a silent challenge and an invitation for redemption. The supermarket parking lot, which had moments ago been a scene of tension and prejudice, now transformed into a stage for a poignant lesson in humanity. The outcome of this confrontation was still unfolding, but one thing was clear: the events of this day would leave a lasting impact on everyone present. The story of George Washington Johnson and Officer Mitchell was just beginning, and the reverberations of this moment would extend far beyond that parking lot, influencing lives and challenging perceptions throughout the community. Officer Mitchell's gaze was a steely, unrelenting force as he scrutinized the documents George Washington Johnson had provided. His every movement was charged with an intensity that seemed to ripple through the parking lot, causing the onlookers to shift uneasily. The atmosphere was thick with tension, each passing second amplifying the mounting unease. Mitchell's suspicion was palpable, his voice a low, accusing murmur as he commented, These documents seemed too convenient. His tone was heavy, with an air of unwarranted skepticism, casting a shadow over George's dignity. George, standing with a grace that belied his years, faced the scrutiny with a calm that seemed to radiate inner strength. Despite the storm of doubt swirling around him, he maintained a poised stance, his voice steady and reassuring. "Officer, I can assure you that all my documents are in order. I have been a law-abiding citizen for 65 years." His words were not just a plea for understanding, but a testament to a lifetime of integrity. Nearby, young Officer Daniels watched the exchange with increasing discomfort, his gaze darting between the stern face of his partner and the elderly man who, despite the accusation, exuded an aura of peaceful innocence. As the scene unfolded, Daniels, his conscience wrestling with the injustice before him, mustered the courage to speak. "Maybe we should reconsider our approach here," he suggested, his voice quivering with a mix of hesitation and moral resolve. Mitchell's reaction was swift and dismissive, a sharp edge to his words as he cut off his rookie partner. "Rookie," he snapped, his frustration palpable. "There's something off here, and I'm going to uncover what it is." His insistence was not just about enforcing the law, but seemed to be driven by an obsessive need to prove his point, regardless of the emotional toll it was taking. The tension was almost unbearable, with Mitchell's declaration echoing ominously across the parking lot, amplifying the scrutiny of the gathered crowd. Their phones emerged like a barrage of electronic eyes, capturing every second of the unfolding drama with a disturbing sense of intrusion. Amidst the growing murmur of discontent, a woman in the crowd, her face flushed with indignation, could no longer contain her outrage. "This is absurd. He's just an elderly gentleman." Her voice cut through the cacophony, a heartfelt plea for reason and compassion. Feeling his control over the situation slip, Mitchell's demeanor grew more aggressive. He turned back to George with a forceful declaration. "I have reason to believe these documents might be forged." His words were laden with an unjust certainty, as if the mere assertion of guilt could somehow make it true. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. A collective gasp of disbelief rippled through the crowd, a wave of shock that seemed to wash over everyone present. George, despite the weight of the accusations, held onto his composure with remarkable grace. Yet, a shadow of hurt and confusion crossed his tired eyes, reflecting the anguish of a man who had lived a lifetime of honor now being questioned in his twilight years. "Officer," he responded, his voice tinged with a slight tremor of vulnerability, "I've been a part of this community for over 6 decades. I've worked hard, paid my taxes, and raised my family here. Why would I resort to forgery now?" The depth of his question was laced with a profound sadness that resonated deeply with everyone who heard it, touching the core of their humanity. Even Officer Daniels felt the sting of tears welling in his eyes, his empathy overshadowed by the harsh reality of the moment. Mitchell, however, seemed impervious to the emotional weight, his response cold and detached. "That's exactly what a criminal would say," he retorted, his voice filled with a certainty that bordered on fanaticism, dismissing the emotional pleas as mere tactics. At this pivotal moment, Sarah, George's daughter, approached through the crowd, her heart pounding with a fierce combination of anger and worry. Pushing past the onlookers, her eyes sparkled with unshed tears and a protective fire. "Excuse me," she interjected, her voice trembling with a potent mix of fear and defiance, "but this man is my father. What on earth is happening here?" Mitchell, momentarily taken aback by Sarah's emotional intervention, stammered, "We're conducting an official investigation. Please step aside." His response was a reflexive attempt to maintain control, but it did little to quell the rising tide of distress. Sarah, driven by a fierce love and an unwavering sense of justice, refused to be sidelined. "Investigation? My dad just came here to get his medicine. He has serious heart problems. The stress you're causing could. Her words were abruptly cut off by a harrowing sound that froze everyone in their tracks. George, clutching his chest with a pained grimace, emitted a low, agonized groan. Father Sarah cried out in sheer panic, rushing to support the frail man who was now swaying unsteadily. The crowd's response was immediate and chaotic, a mix of frantic shouts and anguished cries filling the air. "Call an ambulance, and this is your fault," officer echoed through the parking lot, the weight of collective anger and concern palpable. Daniels, finally finding his voice and summoning the courage to act, stepped forward with a sense of urgency and compassion. "Mitchell, this has gone too far," he said firmly. "We need to assist him, not continue with these baseless accusations." Mitchell's face, for the very first time, betrayed a flicker of doubt. The weight of the situation he had orchestrated was now pressing heavily on his shoulders. The previously simmering tension had escalated to a boiling point, creating an atmosphere charged with unease. At that critical moment, a calm yet authoritative voice sliced through the tumultuous chaos. "What's going on here?" The crowd's collective attention shifted, as if drawn by an unseen force. A tall, middle-aged man made his way forward with purposeful strides, his presence commanding respect. His badge gleamed prominently: Captain Johnson, Police Department. The immediate silence that followed his entrance was palpable, an almost suffocating hush that seemed to amplify the gravity of the situation. Mitchell, now acutely aware of the enormity of his actions, instinctively took a step back. Meanwhile, Daniels let out a quiet sigh of relief, his tension momentarily easing. Captain Johnson's experienced eyes took in the entire scene with a practiced gaze. His voice carried a firm but composed tone. "Mitchell, what is happening here?" Mitchell hesitated, his eyes dropping to the ground as if seeking refuge in the asphalt. "Captain, I..." Before Mitchell could find his words, the captain's attention shifted. "You," he addressed George directly. "Are you all right?" George, his face pallid but retaining a semblance of composure, nodded affirmatively. "I'm fine, thanks to my daughter and the support from those around me." Captain Johnson's expression softened as he addressed the crowd. "We deeply regret this incident. We will conduct a thorough investigation into what has transpired and take all necessary actions to address it." A collective sigh of relief rippled through the crowd, their anger giving way to a cautious sense of resolution. Sarah, still steadfastly supporting her father, managed a small, grateful smile towards those who had stood by them. With a final authoritative nod, Captain Johnson began to manage the situation, ensuring that George received the medical care he needed. As the crowd gradually began to disperse, murmurs of the day's events continued to circulate, each voice adding to the mosaic of the incident. The parking lot, once a battleground of confrontation, now reverberated with the echoes of a community that had witnessed a poignant lesson in dignity, respect, and the essence of justice. Daniel stood apart, the weight of the unfolding injustice bearing down on him. The words "poison destroys" not only those who suffer from it, but also those who practice it resonated in his mind. His heart raced, caught between the loyalty he felt towards his partner and the sense of justice instilled in him by his mother. George, maintaining his dignity despite the aggressive treatment, spoke with calm authority. "Officer, as I have previously explained, these are my legitimate documents. I understand that you are performing your duty, but I urge you to reconsider your approach." The crowd around them thickened, their indignation growing like ripples across a pond. Cell phones continued to capture every detail, documenting the unfolding drama and the stark display of injustice. Summoning his courage, Daniel finally found his voice, prepared to speak out amidst the swirling tide of discontent. "Mitchell, maybe we should reconsider," Daniel suggested, trying to keep his voice steady. "Mr. Johnson doesn't seem to be posing any threat." Mitchell's eyes flashed with irritation as he shot a sharp, authoritative look at his younger partner. "Don't get involved, rookie. You don't have the experience to recognize a suspect when you see one." Mitchell's dismissive words landed on Daniel like a forceful slap. The sting of humiliation and anger made Daniel's face flush with both shame and indignation. His gaze shifted to George, the elderly man standing silently amidst the commotion. For a brief, poignant moment, their eyes met. George's expression was serene, yet profoundly filled with a depth of emotion that spoke volumes. In that fleeting connection, Daniel perceived the weight of many years of struggle, a lifetime marked by dignity, and an unspoken plea for justice. It was as if George's eyes were silently urging him, "You know this is wrong. Do the right thing." Daniel's pulse raced. He realized he was at a crucial juncture, one that would define not only his career but also his integrity. His mother's voice echoed in his mind, offering counsel from beyond the years. "Sometimes, son, doing the right thing is the hardest path, but it's the only path that will let you sleep peacefully at night." Taking a deep breath, Daniel made his decision. He stepped forward with resolve. "Mitchell, this needs to stop now. There's no evidence suggesting a crime has been committed. We're just harassing an innocent citizen." The crowd fell into a heavy silence, watching intently as the tension between the two officers escalated. Mitchell, taken aback by his partner's unexpected courage, momentarily found himself at a loss for words. Seizing the opportunity, Daniel turned his attention back to George. "Mr. Johnson, I apologize for the distress we've caused. You're free to go." A murmur of approval swept through the crowd, underscoring the shift in sentiment. George's eyes welled up with tears, and he gave Daniel a silent nod of gratitude. Mitchell, recovering from his initial shock, stepped forward with an air of menace. "You don't have the authority to make that decision, rookie. I'm the senior officer here." But Daniel held his ground firmly. "And I am an officer sworn to uphold the law and serve with integrity. That's precisely what I'm doing right now." The authoritative voice of Captain Johnson cut through the charged atmosphere. "What's happening here?" All heads turned to see the captain approaching, his face etched with a blend of concern and frustration. Captain Daniel began, his voice betraying a slight tremor. "I believe we've made a grave mistake. Mr. Johnson has done nothing wrong. I should have intervened earlier." The captain surveyed the scene, Daniel's earnest demeanor, Mitchell's defensive stance, and the uneasy crowd. He sighed heavily, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. "Mitchell, my office. Now." "Daniel, I need a full report on this incident." Turning to George, Daniel offered a heartfelt apology. "Mr. Johnson, on behalf of the department, I deeply apologize for what happened today." As Mitchell was led away, Daniel approached George with genuine regret. "Mr. Johnson, I'm truly sorry I didn't act sooner." George rested a reassuring hand on the young officer's shoulder, his touch exuding a genuine warmth and heartfelt encouragement that seemed to defy the chaos around them. "You acted with integrity when it truly mattered, son. It takes a tremendous amount of bravery to confront injustice, particularly when it comes from someone within your circle," he said, his voice steady and full of empathy. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. George's words struck a chord with Daniel, reaching a place within him that had long been overshadowed by the relentless demands and pressures of his role. At that moment, Daniel felt a profound sense of pride swell within him, something he hadn't experienced since the early days of his career. Though he knew his decision would have significant repercussions for his professional path, he found solace in the knowledge that he had stood up for what was right. As the crowd around them began to thin and disperse, Daniel came to a pivotal realization: this single incident was merely the beginning of a much larger and more complex battle. The struggle against prejudice and the quest for justice extended far beyond the confines of his department. It was a pervasive issue that demanded continuous effort and steadfast commitment across all levels of society. Casting one final, contemplative glance at George, Daniel made a silent vow to himself. He promised to become the kind of officer who would make his mother proud and honor the legacy of George Washington Johnson. He knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he was resolute in his commitment to navigate these difficulties with integrity and perseverance. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the parking lot, Daniel felt a sense of renewal. It was as if a new day was dawning for him, a day brimming with hope, courage, and the promise of meaningful change. The tension in the supermarket parking lot had escalated to a boiling point. Officer Mitchell, his eyes ablaze with a feverish intensity, barked with a tone that bordered on fanaticism, "Let's search this old man's car. I'm sure we'll find something incriminating." The young officer, Daniel, felt a chill of dread settle deep in his stomach. "Mitchell, I don't think this is necessary. Mr. Johnson has already explained." "Shut up," newbie Mitchell snapped, cutting Daniel off abruptly with a harsh edge to his voice. "You've got a lot to learn about what it means to be a real cop." George Washington Johnson, the elderly black man at the center of the commotion, stood there, his face a mixture of fear and indignation. "Officers, please, this is absurd. I'm just an ordinary citizen doing my shopping." Mitchell, dismissing the protests with a contemptuous wave, marched towards George's car with a reckless disregard for protocol. He began to rummage through the vehicle's interior, throwing personal items onto the pavement with a blatant lack of care. The crowd around them swelled in size, and disapproving murmurs quickly turned into a chorus of condemnation. Cell phones were raised, capturing every moment of the unfolding injustice for the world to see. "Aha!" Mitchell's voice cut through the clamor with a triumphant note. He brandished a document triumphantly in the air. "Look what we've found here, an irregularity in the car's documents." George's heart sank as he glimpsed the document. "Officer, there must be some mistake. I always keep my documents up to date." Mitchell's smile was cold, lacking any trace of genuine mirth. "Well, it seems that the model citizen isn't so exemplary after all. You're under arrest, old man." The words hit the crowd like a thunderclap. Outrage erupted, and voices rose in passionate defense of George. "This is absurd. You can't do this. It's pure racism." The crowd's anger was palpable, and the scene became a battleground for justice, a poignant reminder of the enduring struggle against prejudice and discrimination. George, who had until now managed to maintain a dignified calm, could no longer contain his frustration. His voice, previously steady, now trembled with exasperation. "This is a complete misunderstanding. I am a respectable citizen. I pay my taxes. I have never broken the law in my entire life." As Daniel observed the scene unfolding before him, he felt a deep sense of inner turmoil. His mother's voice seemed to resonate in his mind, her words echoing with renewed clarity. "Son, there are times in life when you must choose between what is easy and what is right." Feeling his heart pound furiously in his chest, Daniel gathered his courage and took a decisive step forward. "Mitchell, hold on a moment. I believe we need to verify Mr. Johnson's identity before we proceed any further." Mitchell, caught off guard by Daniel's interruption, spun around, his face etched with disbelief and irritation. "What did you say? Are you questioning my authority, rookie?" "No, Sir," Daniel responded, his voice steady but his hands visibly trembling. "I am merely suggesting that we adhere to proper procedure. We need to conduct a thorough verification before any action is taken." The crowd fell into a hushed silence, their eyes fixed on the unfolding confrontation between the two officers. George, looking at Daniel with a blend of surprise and quiet gratitude, seemed to sense a glimmer of hope. Mitchell, now visibly enraged, took a menacing step toward Daniel. Listen here, kid. I am the senior officer here. I issue the orders." Daniel stood his ground, his gaze resolute. A newfound determination shone in his eyes, an unwavering resolve that had not been present before. "With all due respect, sir, if we do not follow proper protocol, we risk infringing on Mr. Johnson's rights. I cannot, in good conscience, allow that to happen." A ripple of approval moved through the crowd, their murmurs reflecting their support for Daniel's stance. George, his eyes glistening with tears, gave a small, grateful nod toward Daniel. At that pivotal moment, an authoritative voice cut sharply through the tense atmosphere. "What on earth is going on here?" Everyone turned to see Captain Johnson approaching, his face a stern mask of worry and irritation. Captain Daniel began, his voice now firm and clear. "I believe we are on the verge of making a grave mistake. Officer Mitchell intends to detain Mr. Johnson based on what he claims to be an irregularity in the documents, yet we have not performed an adequate verification of his identity." The captain's gaze moved from Daniel to Mitchell, then to George, and finally to the restless crowd surrounding them. He exhaled deeply, his frustration palpable. "Mitchell, step away from Mr. Johnson immediately," the captain commanded, his tone brooking no argument. "Daniel, I need you to explain the situation from the beginning." As Daniel recounted the series of events in detail, the captain's expression grew increasingly somber and grim. Each word Daniel spoke seemed to weigh heavily on the captain's shoulders, his face reflecting the gravity of the situation. When Daniel finally concluded his account, the captain turned with a resolute demeanor towards George, who stood amidst the chaotic scene with visible distress. "Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson," the captain said, his voice steady but filled with genuine regret, "on behalf of the entire police department, I want to extend my deepest apologies for the distress and injustice you experienced here today. Please be assured that this incident will undergo a thorough investigation to ensure that such an event never happens again." George, still visibly shaken, and with a slight tremor in his voice, managed to nod in acknowledgement. "Thank you, Captain. All I ask is to be treated with the respect and dignity every individual deserves." The captain then pivoted to face Mitchell, his expression now as hard and unyielding as granite. "Mitchell," he ordered, "hand over your badge and gun immediately. You are suspended from duty until further notice. Your actions today have not only betrayed the trust placed in you, but have also jeopardized the integrity of our department." Mitchell, stunned and rattled by the captain's decision, began to protest vehemently. However, the captain's piercing gaze silenced him, making it clear that no further arguments would be entertained. Turning back to Daniel, the captain said with a note of approval, "Daniel, I expect a full and detailed report on this incident on my desk first thing tomorrow morning. I also want to commend you for your bravery and integrity today. You demonstrated remarkable courage in the face of adversity." As Mitchell was escorted away by other officers, Daniel approached George with a sincere expression of remorse. "Mr. Johnson," he said earnestly, "I am deeply sorry for the distress you've had to endure. No one should have to go through what you experienced today." George placed a reassuring hand on the young officer's shoulder, his voice filled with a quiet strength. "You did the right thing, son. Standing up against injustice is never easy, especially when it involves someone you once respected. But it's actions like yours that spark real change. This is how progress begins." If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Daniel was deeply moved by George's words. Despite the turmoil and challenges ahead, for the first time since starting his career as a police officer, Daniel felt a profound sense of pride in his role. As the crowd around them began to disperse, many people approached George to offer their support and express their appreciation for Daniel's courageous actions. What began as a moment of prejudice had evolved into an opportunity for unity and hope within the community. Daniel watched as George, accompanied by his daughter who had arrived amid the commotion, walked away with a sense of relief and resilience. Daniel understood that this was only the beginning of a long journey toward combating prejudice and fostering justice, not just within his department but throughout the broader society. Gazing down at the badge on his chest, Daniel made a silent vow to himself and all individuals like George Johnson. He committed to being the kind of police officer who made a meaningful difference, who stood up for what was right, regardless of the personal cost. He knew the path would be arduous and fraught with challenges, but he was prepared to face it with unwavering determination. As the day drew to a close, Daniel was filled with a mixture of exhaustion and resolute determination. This incident had indelibly altered his perspective and sense of purpose. He recognized that, in some small but significant way, he had contributed to changing the world for the better, one brave decision at a time. There was still much work to be done, but Daniel was ready to continue striving for a more just and equitable future for all. The supermarket parking lot, once a mundane space for everyday transactions, now buzzed with a palpable tension. Amidst the swirling chaos, George Washington Johnson, the elderly black man who had been wrongfully accused, maintained a quiet dignity that stood in stark contrast to the tumultuous scene surrounding him. Officer Mitchell, George said, his voice calm yet imbued with a steely authority that cut through the tension, "I need to speak with your superior immediately. I believe that if we address this with the right person, we can resolve this matter quickly and fairly." Mitchell, inflated by his sense of superiority and misplaced arrogance, responded with a dismissive laugh that betrayed his disregard for the gravity of the situation. "Oh, of course, and next you'll tell me you're the President of the United States. You're in no position to make demands, old man." The crowd that had gathered around them erupted in audible outrage, their anger rising as the scene unfolded before their eyes. Cell phones were held aloft, recording every moment of what was quickly becoming a spectacle of injustice. The air was thick with murmurs of discontent and the flashing lights of cameras capturing the unfolding drama. Amidst the crowd, a young police officer stood, visibly shaken by the scene he was witnessing. Internally, he wrestled with a growing sense of wrongness. His mother's words echoed in his mind, a haunting reminder of his valued son. Sometimes silence makes us accomplices. His heart raced, burdened by the weight of the moral dilemma he faced. He took a deep breath, steeling himself against the tide of uncertainty, and stepped forward with resolve. "Mitchell," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I'm going to check his ID. It's standard procedure, and we need to follow it." Mitchell's sneer deepened, his voice dripping with contempt. "Do whatever you want, rookie. But don't dawdle, we have a criminal to deal with." Daniels turned and walked away, his steps heavy with the gravity of the situation. George's gaze followed him, a mix of hope and trepidation reflecting in his eyes. The young officer felt the intensity of that gaze weigh heavily upon him as he approached the police car to conduct the ID check. Each passing minute felt like an eternity, filled with a charged silence that only heightened the tension. The crowd grew restless, their collective outrage spreading like ripples across a pond. George stood tall and unyielding, his posture a silent declaration of resistance against the wrongful treatment he was enduring. When Daniels finally returned, his face was pale, and his eyes were wide with shock and dismay. He approached Mitchell with a sense of urgency that contrasted sharply with the earlier arrogance. His voice, though trembling, carried a note of undeniable truth. "Mitchell, we need to talk right now." Mitchell, clearly agitated by the interruption, followed Daniels to the side with a begrudging expression. "What's the matter now, rookie? Did you discover something new?" Daniels took a deep breath, his courage bolstered by the weight of his responsibility. "Mitchell, we've made a monumental mistake. Mr. Johnson is not just any individual, he's a retired Supreme Court justice. The silence that followed was deafening, a heavy blanket of shock and disbelief settling over the scene. For the first time, Mitchell's confident demeanor faltered, revealing the cracks in his armor. What? That's impossible. Not only is it possible, Daniels replied, his voice gaining strength as he spoke the truth. It's the reality. Mr. Johnson is renowned for his groundbreaking work on civil rights cases. He's a respected figure with a legacy of advocating for justice and equality. Mitchell's irritation turned to an uneasy realization, but it was too late. The incident had already begun to spread across social media like wildfire. Smartphones across the parking lot buzzed with notifications, broadcasting the unfolding truth to the world in real time. As the crowd's mood shifted to one of anxious anticipation, George took a deliberate step forward, his voice calm yet authoritative, commanding the attention of everyone present. Officers, citizens, please let us remain calm. While this situation is deeply regrettable, it presents us with a crucial opportunity, an opportunity for dialogue and mutual understanding. We must use this moment to reflect on our actions and strive for justice and fairness. The atmosphere grew heavy with anticipation as the crowd fell silent, deeply engaged in the gravity of the moment. Mitchell, visibly shaken by the unfolding events, took a hesitant step back, the full weight of his actions finally crashing down upon him. The realization of what he had done was evident in his trembling form and downcast eyes. Daniels, standing amid the tension, felt the immense responsibility of the situation pressing upon him. He made his way over to George, his face a picture of remorse and resolve. "Your Honor," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm profoundly sorry. There are no justifications for the events that transpired today. None whatsoever." George, embodying a mixture of compassion and authority, placed a reassuring hand on the young officer's shoulder. "Officer Daniels," he said with a calm yet firm tone, "you demonstrated remarkable bravery today, the bravery to question, to act with integrity, even when faced with the most challenging circumstances. That's exactly the kind of courage we need in our police forces." As if on cue, the distant wail of sirens began to pierce the air, signaling the approach of Captain Johnson. The commotion had now spread far beyond the confines of the supermarket parking lot, drawing the attention of higher authorities. When Captain Johnson arrived and exited his vehicle, his expression was a mixture of concern and steely resolve. "What on earth is happening here?" he demanded, his voice reflecting his urgency and frustration. Daniel stepped forward, prepared to shoulder the blame and provide clarity, but George placed a calming hand on his arm, indicating that he would speak first. "Captain," George began, his voice steady and authoritative, "we are dealing with a serious misunderstanding here, a misunderstanding that is unfortunately emblematic of deeper, systemic issues within our society." The captain, upon recognizing George, appeared visibly shaken. His face paled, and he stammered, "Your Honor, Johnson, I am at a loss for words. I am deeply embarrassed and profoundly sorry for what has occurred." George nodded in acknowledgement, accepting the captain's apology, but his expression remained resolute. "Captain, what has happened today cannot be dismissed or overlooked. We must address these issues of prejudice and misuse of power directly and without hesitation." The crowd murmured in agreement, their voices a collective wave of support for the call for change. The hum of smartphones capturing the scene continued, broadcasting the events live to thousands, perhaps even millions of viewers across the globe. Captain Johnson, recognizing the magnitude of the moment, nodded solemnly. "You are right, Your Honor. I commit to conducting a thorough and transparent investigation into this incident." Turning to face the crowd, George raised his voice to address everyone present. "My friends," he began, his tone filled with a mix of pain and hope. "What we witnessed here today is indeed heartbreaking. but it also presents us with an invaluable opportunity, a chance for meaningful growth and positive change. Let not your anger consume you, but rather channel it into constructive action. Demand comprehensive training for our officers, insist on greater accountability, and foster an open and honest dialogue about race and power in our society. George's words resonated deeply, filling the parking lot with a sense of purpose and unity. Many in the crowd were visibly moved, their eyes glistening with tears as they absorbed the gravity of his message. The dignified manner in which George addressed the situation, especially after having been so unjustly treated moments earlier, left a profound impact. Daniels observed the scene with a complex mix of shame and determination. He understood that his career and life had irrevocably changed with this day's events. Yet, he also felt a renewed sense of purpose to be a police officer who truly makes a difference, who stands firm for justice above all else. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 4 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. As Captain Johnson began to manage the crowd's dispersal and address the assembled press, George approached Daniels one final time. "Officer Daniels," he said softly, his voice carrying both encouragement and weight, "remember this day not as one of disgrace, but as a pivotal moment of transformation. The path forward will be challenging, but it is necessary. I trust young people like you to be the leaders who will drive this change." With those parting words, George walked away, leaving Daniels with a profound sense of purpose and resolve. The young officer surveyed the organized chaos around him and made a silent vow to be the catalyst for change that his community, his department, and his country so urgently needed. The incident in the supermarket parking lot was drawing to a close, but its implications were only beginning to unfold. A new chapter of transformation, justice, and hope was on the horizon, and Daniels was determined to play a central role in writing that story. The video capturing the incident in the supermarket parking lot spread rapidly across social media, igniting a firestorm of outrage. Within hours, it amassed millions of views, was shared countless times, and prompted an avalanche of enraged comments. The footage showed a Supreme Court judge being treated with shocking disrespect, likened to an ordinary criminal. The online uproar was palpable. It's astounding, how could a Supreme Court judge be subjected to such treatment? This is a stark reminder of the deep-seated racism still embedded in our institutions. We demand justice. Officer Mitchell must be terminated from his position immediately. The immense pressure on the police department was undeniable. Police Chief Robert Anderson found himself ensnared in a challenging predicament. He understood the urgency of addressing the situation, but was also acutely aware of the complex political landscape surrounding it. At a hastily convened press conference, he declared, "We will initiate an internal investigation without delay. Rest assured, every detail will be scrutinized thoroughly to ensure accountability." However, behind the scenes, the situation grew increasingly troubling. Despite the blatant inappropriateness of Officer Mitchell's conduct, he seemed to be shielded from consequences. Mitchell's long tenure, influential connections, and the discreet backing of colleagues who feared that his removal might set a precarious precedent for the department protected him. In stark contrast, Officer Daniels quickly found out the cost of standing up for what he believed was right. On a frosty morning, he was summoned to Captain Johnson's office. "Daniels," the captain began, avoiding eye contact, "you are being reassigned to Millbrook Police Station." Daniels's heart sank. Millbrook was a remote, isolated town several hours away, effectively a professional exile. But Captain Daniels protested, "Why is this happening? I followed the proper procedures. I acted according to my principles." The captain exhaled heavily. "Listen, son, sometimes doing the right thing comes with a price. You've disrupted the system, and now the system is retaliating." Meanwhile, Mitchell continued his duties unscathed, even receiving vocal support from certain segments of the community who justified his actions as necessary, albeit aggressive policing. Daniels's frustration grew with each passing day. He watched Mitchell strut through the precinct with an air of impunity while he was ostracized. The profound sense of injustice gnawed at him. One sleepless night, Daniels reached out to his mother, his voice trembling with emotion. "Mom, I don't know what to do," he confessed. "It feels like the entire system is conspiring against me." Her voice, though soft, carried a reassuring firmness. "Daniel, remember what I've always told you: truth and justice may not triumph immediately, but they will prevail in the end. Do not lose hope." Her words offered some solace, yet the harsh reality remained unyielding. As Daniels prepared for his transfer the following day, he was surprised by an unexpected visitor. George Washington Johnson, the retired judge at the heart of the controversy, entered his office with a calm demeanor. "Officer Daniels," he said, his voice filled with compassion, "I've heard about your reassignment. I want you to know that your actions that day did not go unnoticed." Tears welled up in Daniels's eyes. "Your Honor, I only did what I believed was right, but it seems like it's all for nothing." Judge Johnson placed a comforting hand on Daniels's shoulder. "It matters more than you realize. Sometimes change begins with a single act of courage. You've planted a seed, and it will grow." The judge's words kindled a glimmer of hope in Daniels. Perhaps, despite the grim circumstances, his efforts would not be in vain. As he drove to Millbrook the next day, his heart was heavy with the weight of his new reality, but his resolve remained steadfast. He understood that the battle for justice would be arduous and prolonged, but he was prepared to confront it with unwavering determination. On the horizon, dark clouds were gathering, casting an ominous shadow over the landscape and signaling the impending arrival of a storm. Yet amidst the encroaching tempest, Daniels remained steadfast in his belief that, beyond the storm, there lay a period of calm and, with it, a potential opportunity for genuine change. The narrative of Daniels, Mitchell, and George was far from reaching its conclusion. The seeds of truth and justice had been sown, and although the road ahead was fraught with difficulties, the possibility of transformation remained very much alive. The public continued to be vigilant, their eyes fixed on the unfolding drama and demanding answers and reforms. Somewhere, hidden in the shadows, there was someone with crucial information, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it and alter the course of events. In the small apartment in Millbrook, the weight of solitude seemed to envelop Daniels completely. Seated at the kitchen table, he mindlessly scrolled through the headlines on his tablet, each news article a reminder of the ongoing struggle. His once hopeful and determined face was now etched with the lines of fatigue and disillusionment. Protests continue after an incident involving a retired judge read one of the headlines, while another announced, "Officer Mitchell stands firm, department promises reforms." Daniels felt a surge of bitterness rises in his throat. He had made the right choice, yet here he was, isolated in a small rural town, while Mitchell remained unpunished and the status quo seemed unchanged. The oppressive silence was abruptly shattered by the ringing of his phone. "Daniel, how are you?" Son, his mother's voice on the other end of the line was like a soothing balm to his troubled spirit. The tears he had been holding back for days finally overflowed. "Mom, I don't know if I did the right thing. My career feels shattered, and for what? Mitchell is still in his position. Nothing has changed." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then his mother's voice came through, resolute and brimming with conviction. "Daniel Washington, listen to me. You did exactly what your father and I taught you to do. You stood up against injustice even when you knew it would come with a price. I've never been prouder of you." Her words struck Daniel with the force of a revelation, rekindling a spark of hope he thought had extinguished. "But Mom, what if I sacrificed my chance to make a difference? What if I never get back to a place where I can genuinely help people?" "Son," his mother's voice softened, "you are already making a difference. Every act of bravery inspires others. You have planted a seed of change, and it will grow, even if you don't see its full bloom." After ending the call, Daniel sat in contemplation for a long while, his mother's encouraging words resonating in his mind. He rose from his seat and approached the window, gazing out at the tranquil street of Millbrook. At that moment, a clear decision crystallized within him. He would not, and could not, give up. The quest for justice was greater than his career, more significant than his struggles. In the ensuing days, Daniel devoted himself to his duties at the modest Millbrook police station with renewed vigor. He approached each case and every individual with the same respect and dedication he had once offered in his previous role. One afternoon, as he patrolled the quiet streets, he was approached by an elderly woman. With a glint of recognition in her eyes, she said, "You're that officer from the video, aren't you? The one who stood up for Judge Johnson." Daniel nodded, taken aback. The woman smiled warmly and placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "I want you to know that what you did was deeply meaningful to us. My grandson aspires to be a police officer now because of you. He says he wants to follow in your footsteps." The woman's words were a balm to Daniel's weary soul, reaffirming the impact of his actions and fueling his resolve to continue the fight for justice. The lady's words struck Daniel with an intensity that felt like a punch to the gut, yet it was a punch that stirred him deeply and left him feeling oddly uplifted. For the first time, he understood that even in a small, quiet town like Millbrook, his actions had made a significant impact. It was as if the enormity of his efforts was finally acknowledged, and he realized that the ripples of his choices had spread farther than he had ever imagined. This recognition was not just a validation of his work, but a profound reminder of the difference one person can make. The realization was both humbling and empowering, giving him a renewed sense of purpose and conviction. That night, under the soft glow of his desk lamp, Daniel sat at his computer, feeling a surge of determination. He began to type furiously, pouring his thoughts and emotions into documenting every facet of what had transpired. He meticulously recorded every detail: the incident with Judge Johnson, Mitchell's reprehensible actions, and the department's evasive responses. The task was as much about preserving the truth as it was about unburdening himself. He knew that the future was uncertain, but he felt a pressing need to ensure that every moment of his struggle was captured, a testament to his fight for justice. It was a cathartic exercise, transforming his turmoil into a tangible record of his quest for truth. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 5 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. As he was absorbed in his writing, a sudden notification blinked on his screen. It was an email from Sarah Martinez, an investigative journalist with a prominent national newspaper. The message was brief but charged with significance. "Officer Daniels, I am currently investigating the incident involving Judge Johnson and Officer Mitchell. Sources have informed me of your pivotal role in this case. I believe your story is crucial and deserves to be told. I would like to discuss this further. Sincerely, Sarah Martinez." Daniel's heart pounded as he read the email. The prospect of responding was both exhilarating and terrifying. This could be the end of his career in law enforcement, a potential consequence he was willing to face for the chance to reveal the truth and spark meaningful change. With a sense of trembling resolve, he composed his reply. "MS. Martinez, thank you for reaching out. The events that unfolded that day in the supermarket parking lot were merely the surface of a much deeper and more troubling issue. There is so much more that needs to be brought to light, and I am ready to speak out, not for my benefit, but for those who suffer in silence and injustice daily. Sincerely, Daniel." When Daniel pressed send, he felt an immense weight lift from his shoulders, a sensation of liberation and resolve. The future was still cloaked in uncertainty, but for the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of hope. The act of sending that email was a significant step toward confronting the truth and standing up for what was right, no matter the personal cost. In the following days, Daniel carried out his duties in Millbrook with a newfound sense of purpose. He followed the news closely, watching the coverage of protests supporting Judge Johnson with a mix of pride and determination. One afternoon, as he watched a live broadcast of a peaceful demonstration from his old town, he saw something that made his heart swell with emotion. Among the sea of banners and signs, one stood out vividly. "Where's Officer Daniels? We want more cops like him." It was a powerful affirmation that his efforts had resonated and that his struggle had inspired others. At that moment, Daniel felt a profound sense of validation and hope. His actions had sparked a movement, and he understood that his fight had not been in vain. Despite knowing that he faced many more challenges ahead, he felt an unwavering resolve to continue his quest for justice. The road was still fraught with obstacles, but the support and acknowledgement he had received ignited a deeper commitment to his cause. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden light over Millbrook, Daniel picked up his phone and dialed a number that was both familiar and comforting. "Mom, I've made a decision. I'm going to tell my story. I'm going to fight for the truth, no matter the cost." He could almost hear the pride and love in his mother's voice as she responded, "That's my son. Remember, Daniel, the truth always prevails in the end." Always her words were a balm to his soul, providing him with strength and encouragement as he prepared for the next chapter of his journey. The fight for justice was far from over, but with her support, Daniel felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. The case involving Judge George Washington Johnson and Officer Daniels extended far beyond the confines of that supermarket parking lot. It became a powerful catalyst for widespread change within the police department and the broader society. Daniel's interview with journalist Sarah Martinez evolved into a series of investigative reports that unveiled not only the specifics of the incident, but also exposed deep-seated systemic biases and abuses of power within the police force. The public, already stirred by the initial footage, demanded concrete action. Under immense scrutiny, the police department was compelled to implement sweeping reforms. Officer Mitchell faced suspension and, following a comprehensive investigation, was dismissed from his position. The department introduced new training programs centered on racial sensitivity and conflict de-escalation, and a civilian oversight board was established to independently review cases of police misconduct. Daniel was reinstated to his role, but also received a promotion to lead a new unit focused on improving police-community relations. Inspired by Daniel's courage, Judge Johnson came out of retirement to head a state commission on criminal justice reform, dedicating himself to addressing systemic inequities within the legal system. Daniel's story became a beacon of integrity and moral courage, inspiring a new generation of police recruits who joined the force with a genuine commitment to justice and service. Years later, at a police academy graduation ceremony, Daniel, now a respected captain, delivered a moving speech to the new officers. "Always remember, our duty extends beyond merely enforcing the law. It is about ensuring that justice is served equitably, regardless of race, color, or status. True courage lies not in blind adherence to orders, but in the strength to do what is right, even when it is challenging. Each of you has the power to make a meaningful difference and embody the change we aspire to see in our society." As Daniel gazed at the hopeful faces of the recruits, he spotted among them the grandson of the Millbrook lady who had first recognized him. The young man's smile and nod were a poignant reminder that every act of courage can inspire waves of change that ripple through generations. The journey that began in that parking lot was far from over, but it had planted the seeds of hope, justice, and transformation that would continue to flourish in the years to come. The legacy of Daniel, Judge Johnson, and all who stood against injustice would remain a guiding light, illuminating the path toward a more just and equitable future. Thank you for joining us today. We've explored a profound and emotional narrative that sheds light on important issues surrounding justice, dignity, and humanity. As you reflect on the story of George Washington Johnson and Officer Mitchell, take a moment to consider what you've learned from this experience. We'd love to hear from you. Please comment below and share one key insight you've gained from this story and how you plan to apply it in your life. Your thoughts and reflections are valuable to us and to others who may be experiencing similar situations. If you enjoyed this video and found it meaningful, please leave your comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an update. And remember, if you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and activate the bell to stay updated with our latest content. Thank you for watching and being part of our community. Your engagement helps us continue creating content that matters.